So Abel brings his best to the table. So he takes the best animal in his flock, and he takes the best cut and the best part of the cut, and he offers that to God. So he literally brings his best to the table. That's what he sacrifices. And Cain doesn't. So Cain's sacrifices are rejected by God. And God tells him, if you brought your best to the table, you'd be accepted. And Cain gets bitter and resentful and invites temptation in to possess him. So that spirit of resentment possesses him, and then he becomes murderous. He kills his brother, and his descendants become genocidal, and then you have the flood. And so that pattern of sacrifice is established right at the beginning of the biblical texts. Abel versus Cain. Abel brings the best to the table, and that satisfies God. So one question. God actually asks Cain this when Cain complains. He says, wouldn't you be accepted if you were doing your best? And so that's a question of conscience, right? If you're in extreme misery and your life is hollow and empty and you're bitter and resentful, it's like, you bringing your best to the table? Because the covenant proclaims that if you did, you'd be accepted.
Yeah,
so
clearly.
Okay, so now the question is, what constitutes, now you know you have to sacrifice. So sacrifice becomes the foundation of the state, not power, not hedonism, it's sacrifice. The idea that, see, Christ is the exemplar of voluntary self-sacrifice, right? Won't turn to power, won't deviate from his course, faces the worst of all possible deaths, descends to hell itself. That's the pattern of life lived with no reserve. These are weird stories because the way they're true is very sophisticated. They're true always. That's different than a story about the past. Like, the truest story is always happening. The story of Moses is exactly like that. Like the pattern of leadership development that's embedded in the Exodus story, that is how leaders develop, if they're real leaders. And their temptation is power, but that's not their motivation. That's their temptation, right? That's a very important distinction. And that's always the case with leaders. And if they fall prey to the temptation of power, no matter what their accomplishments, they're not going to complete the task.